Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107.1, and I'm pleased to know that we've got all of our guests, it looks like, on the program this afternoon. I was a little concerned. I've been trying to get hold of one of our guests, well, all day, and the other one, Pat Whaley, half the day, Pastor Patrick Whaley. And as I introduce our guest first, Pastor, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, Lockwood. So good to be here.
I look forward to the conversation we're going to have here in a few moments. And also joining us, Patrick Curley, and he's a member of Rotary Morehead City, and also he and his wife have opened their doors and their house to Ukrainian refugees. And so, Patrick, good afternoon. Thanks for taking the time, and welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Patrick Whaley, I'm sorry, Pat Curley. Too many Pats in my life. Pat, the question I have for you, of course, you've got a young lady who joined you now 3 months ago. Am I about right?
This is the second month. Yeah,
second month. Okay. I'm trying to push time along very quickly. Katrina, how has that gone for you all? I mean, here she's been watching, I'm sure, with a great deal of concern about her country and her friends and family. How is she doing under the circumstances? And that's unfair to be. Go ahead.
Well, she's from Odessa, which is really getting heavily attacked by the Russians. So that, I think it's taken its toll a little bit. She's really been anxious about getting her sister over here, and it's been kind of a frustrating process. But other than that, she's settling okay. She actually she got herself a part-time job in Jacksonville at the Barnes & Noble bookstore, which was a fantasy for her because she's a big book reader.
Uh-huh.
And my wife and I picked up a used car, and she's learning how to drive, and hopefully we'll get her all settled in.
Okay, that's an interesting question about learning how to drive. I'm going to turn to Pat Whaley, who's here in the studio with us, and of course, Pastor Pat Whaley has lived in Ukraine for 15 years full-time. Well, Ukraine, in the region, part of it in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia as well. What's the driving like? Well, how do they drive? And I mean, do they use the same basic profile that we do in the States, driving on the right-hand side of the road?
Correct, they do. But most families will take the trams and the buses and other means of public transportation.
Okay, so it's not unusual not to be driving.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm curious, Pat Curley, had Kate driven in Ukraine before, or is this a new experience for her?
She has never driven before, so this is a brand new experience for her. And we stay on the road most of the time, and but she's doing okay. I think within the next couple of weeks she should be able to pass her driver's test.
Outstanding. We just tell her that it's every third answer is B. Whatever.
Well, little things like that it's very interesting. She speaks English well, but she doesn't know all the English words. And so when she took her first, the written test, she walked out and said, my problem was I didn't know what some of the words were.
Right.
I didn't know what they meant.
Yeah.
And so she studied and went and took the test the second time and did super fantastic. But those little barriers, you just don't understand. And I will tell you this: when it doesn't matter whether or not you're able to drive or not, we're in contact with the other 4 families down at Wilmington, and even though they might have 10 years of experience driving in Ukraine, when they come to this country to get car insurance, they're considered a first-year inexperienced driver as far as the cost of insurance goes.
Yeah, that I understand. That makes sense. The other aspect of this, I'm going to turn to you, Pat Whaley, Pastor Patrick Whaley. The traffic here in this country, I'm thinking is a little different than it is in the Ukraine as far as speed, the on ramps, off ramps, things of this nature. Is there?
Absolutely correct. but traffic is crazy there.
Oh, it is?
When
Okay.
because they don't have the experience of driving.
Well, it's like well, they drive in Ukraine like they probably drive in Boston. And in Boston, a red light means to slow down. Anyhow, I just
and Pat fill up the tank all the way full, and she won't know what to do with that. There's not a, and I'm saying this nicely, not a Ukrainian that I know, when they put gas in, they put it to a quarter of a tank because that's all the money they've got is to be able to put it in.
That's a good point.
And so I fill it all the way up for them, and then once again it's empty,
Right.
and they just have it at a quarter of a tank.
Right. That's an interesting point. You know, to that point, you know, the assimilation of these refugees, and that is difficult. And to your comment a moment ago, Pat Curley, you know, there's a lot to learn, and it's even though her English is excellent, we've spoken to her, she's been on the air with us.
Right.
There are so many things that little nuances, if you will, about our country in comparison to hers. All right, the topic of Odessa here, just a moment. Well, before I even go any further, Pat Curley, you are a Rotarian, but you also are working with a project. How about sharing that with the audience so that folks listening may be interested in supporting the program for these asylum seekers? What is the program?
Okay, so the program is called Welcome US. You can find it on their website, welcome.us.
Right.
And the way this program works is it's not just Ukrainian refugees now. There's many from all over the world. But you basically fill out a profile about yourself, where you live, what resources you have, etc. And then people who are looking for assistance or asylum reach out to you. My wife and I turned away about, I'd say, well over 50 families.
Ooh.
Because we just didn't have the resources that they needed. You know, a family of 6 with a grandma, no one speaks English. I couldn't help them.
Right.
And that's what, when we got Kate's message there, we were like, well, you know what, we can do that. 2 young ladies, we raised 2 young daughters ourselves. We had empty bedrooms, piece of cake.
Right. All right. Let's talk here for a moment about Kate's sister. You said that she, of course, was waiting. She needs a new passport. She's now she's 18 years old, or she's going to be 18 years old. Is that correct? And had to get a new passport. So she turned 18 years old, so she needed a new passport. Right.
And of course, the Ukrainian government is a little busy right now.
Oh, just a little.
Yeah. So it took her some time to get it, and she finally got it. Once she got it, within an hour after she received it, I applied to immigration the I-134 form, basically which my wife and I are obligating ourselves up to 2 years financially to support these 2 young ladies. And we submitted the I-134 form, and it has taken forever to get. You know, they came back and said, yeah, it's approved, but we haven't been able to get it to the sister because there was a mix-up with an email.
Right.
So she would have been here probably 2 weeks ago. We finally got it squared away. It's been immigration is really tough. It's really hard to talk to a human being. I guess that's with everything nowadays, but really hard with them. It took a lot of work. But we got it squared away, and we got the authorization to travel today. But when we saw the authorization to travel, we realized that Daria, who doesn't have that mastery of English that her sister does, she listed her birth date as day, month, year versus month, day, year. Mm-hmm. So her birth date's incorrect. So now we're trying to get that corrected so that she can get over the border.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm. It's like a tragedy. It's a tragedy of errors, or a comedy of errors.
Comedy, you know? Yeah. Pat, real quickly, I want to get to Pat Whaley here in a moment, and we're going to talk about Odessa. You are also a member of Rotary, the Noon Rotary Club. Am I correct on that? Morehead City?
No,
Evening.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I'm actually the assistant governor for innovative clubs. our Rotary District has several innovative clubs, such as the Club for the Empowerment of Women. We have the Club for the Prevention of Child Abuse. And my club is all scouts from around the world.
Okay.
And so we're the Rotary Club of the Friendship Knot, and we all wear a distinctive neckerchief. As a matter of fact, I just got a picture yesterday that one of our members from France met one of our members from North Carolina at Kandersteg, which is the World Scouting Center in Switzerland this past weekend. And they noticed each other by their neckerchiefs.
That's outstanding. All right, moving back to Ukraine, and let's talk here with Patrick Whaley. Patrick, I don't know if Patrick Curley has heard all the information. You've been in touch with some of your contacts in Ukraine. He mentioned Odessa. And you talked about this earlier. Pat Curley, Pastor Whaley made mention of the fact that Odessa is considered a kind of a very artistic community. It's very almost. But you expected it to be untouched, as a matter of fact.
Correct. That area in downtown Odessa is from the 1700s.
It's historically
correct. With the
significant.
The Russian Orthodox Church that was destroyed by the bomb.
Was it destroyed or just?
I don't think it was totally destroyed.
But it was damaged, significantly damaged.
Correct. The Opera House. There's many other things right there that is romantic Russian from the 1700s. Catherine the Great and Peter the Great and those types of things.
So what have you heard from your friends and contacts in Ukraine?
Specifically about Odessa
or any of the other areas?
Well, with Odessa, I mean, they've got the church pretty much cleaned up now, it's my understanding.
Okay.
And people are on edge because the outskirts of Odessa, where the ports are located on Odessa, have been bombed quite frequently here lately. Across the country, there hadn't been quite as much.
Really?
As there has been. I mean, in Kyiv, there's been some, but they've been able to deflect those for the most part. Eastern Ukraine, southeastern Ukraine, where the battle continues to go on, and Ukrainians are making advances that they're excited about. But the others are kind of a bit prayerful right now.
All right.
Of what's going on. Now, friends in Poland and Lithuania is another story.
Yeah, because they're concerned about the Wagner group in Belarus. All right. Pat Curley, the conversations that has Kate been able to make contact with her friends and maybe even family members in Ukraine, and how is she doing? As I mentioned in the opening, this is a little stressful for her, I know, from just the aspect of the war in general. But now, as you pointed out a few moments ago, she's from Odessa, and to see these stories, what is she hearing? If she able to make contact is the first question, and if so, what is she hearing?
Well, that's good that you asked that, Lockwood. She is in contact with her parents, with her friends on a daily basis, and she's got access to Ukrainian news. And I will tell you, it's been pretty interesting. Their biggest fear and the biggest topic of the discussions have been the fear of sabotage of the nuclear power plants.
Is there a I can't.
Correct.
Is Zaragoza?
Yes.
Oh, all right.
Yes.
Yeah. And so they've been very, very concerned about the nuclear power plants. And it's funny because that's all the news that she was hearing from Ukraine was about the nuclear power plants. But she didn't hear a thing about it over here. And I said, well, that's because of submarine spunk. And we're just not paying attention. Someone, you watch the local news, someone rescued a kitten, so we're not going to talk about that other stuff, And, but yeah, so she was, she would watch our news and say, well, how come they're not talking about what the important things are? And so that, it's interesting you asked that.
That is a good point. And one of the reasons, by the way, Pat Curley, we do this every Monday, is to remind our audience, who, by the way, have been very, very generous. We'll leave it at that. I'm cognizant of some of the generosity that has been shared with the Ukrainians from our community significant contributions. I just will leave it at that. But we talk about this specifically and point out in our conversations, quite frankly, how much of the Ukrainian war, the war with Ukraine and Russia, has fallen off the front pages of our paper, number one. And then the second thing is, in the process, the loss of connectivity, because one of the things we keep talking about here, and I'm just going to make a plea right out of the opening here, if you're thinking about making any contribution, I would ask you to please do so by sending a check to First Methodist Church in Morehead City. That's First Methodist Church in Morehead City, 900 Arundel Street, Morehead City, 28557. First Methodist Church, 900 Arundel Street, Morehead City, North Carolina, 28557. And if you'll put on your check, Ukraine, 100% of that money goes to the organizations that Pastor Pat Whaley is identifying through the Methodist,
Correct.
Methodist Church.
But it's not all Methodist.
It's not all, but
yes,
but
it goes through the Methodist Church, but it's open for all people. It's over there that's in need.
Yeah, going to churches and orphanages. We've got to talk about that. I want to ask you about that in a moment, Pat Curley. But if you will give that money 100%. And by the way, I just want to make a quick note. Thank you, First Citizens Bank, which pays all of the fees covers all the fees associated with the transfer. Pat Curley, back to you. We talked earlier about the issue of orphanages and the fact that there are so many people, the infirm, the elderly, who cannot escape. What is Kate hearing about that? Is she hearing anything about that?
Well, we're hearing a lot about it, and she's got so many friends and relatives and all that are all trying to get out of there, but they need sponsors, and they just aren't getting them. And it's interesting when you talk about the financial assistance, because literally Kate's getting hardly any. She's getting nothing. All of the expenses of them being over here, is my wife and I are covering that, and we are asking that organizations consider some of the refugees that are here, because some of them are really having a hard time. The groups that we talked in Wilmington, there's one woman there who is a dentist, and she's cleaning houses right now because they don't, because of the language, they can't they can't speak the language and all. So there's a lot of assistance that people can give right here in our own community.
Okay.
And that's something to think about also. And that's what I mean. We could help more people, but folks have to step up here and work together as communities to host some of these folks and bring them over.
All right.
That's what I got to say about that.
Well, that's an important story, Pat Curley with us. And by the way, the program is called Welcome US, and the website is welcome.us. Am I correct on that?
That is correct.
All right.
And basically, all they do is they're helping you to connect with a family.
Okay.
But as far as getting them over here, it's going to cost us almost a little over $3,000 to get Daria over here.
Okay.
And so that's things to think about.
All right, and we will. I just want to thank you, Pat Curley, for taking time today. I think it's an important story, and I don't want folks to forget about the circumstances in Ukraine, the challenges, and as you've just shared with us, the challenges here in the States as well. I will be back in touch with you, and we'll hopefully have the opportunity to talk to Kate and her sister here in the near term. At this point, when do you anticipate, if all things go smoothly, when would you expect to see her sister?
Well, we're thinking next week.
Okay.
Good.
She can't. Of course, they can't fly out of Ukraine, so she's going to have to get her way to Warsaw,
right?
Poland, and we're trying to figure out the funding.
Okay.
She doesn't have the funds to get there, so we're going to have to call and make reservations for her and everything, and
okay,
we'll see what we can do.
Okay, all right. Pat Curley with us. Thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate your time, Pat. Have a great day.